Hi guys, welcome to today's recording. I'll be going through the NCEA Level 1 2021's genetics variation paper. So let's get started. So first question, so these couple have three children, 2 girls, 1 boy, to show the sex inheritance. So what you want to make sure is that you know that a female is XX and the male is XY. And then we can do that here. So let's put XX here, XY here. So they get half of the chromosomes from each parent. So this is XX, 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 XY, XY. So you look at, the vertical column here. So this is Y, this is XX, this is XX, just it's a combination of the alleles from the parents. Okay, now how 6 of the children is determined in humans. So that just by fertilization. So you have the mother, which gives you the XX chromosomes, and then the father, which gives you the XY chromosome. So if you think about the gametes, the 6 cells, so the 6 cells could be X, well, it has to be X for the females, for the mothers, and then for the fathers, the chromosomes could be X and Y. So it really depends on which chromosome they get from the dad. Okay, so it's a 50% chance that you get the Y from the father, 50% chance you get the Y from the father, then they will combine with the X chromosome from the mother. Okay, so if you look at the answers here, so you can see that woman XX, so that when they create X, or you can just say 6 cells, half the chromosome, which has half the number of chromosomes, they'll both be X. But for a male, that's XY, so half the chromosomes will be X, the other half will be Y. So it's a 50% chance that the child will be a girl or a boy. Okay, there may be some factors that will influence this odd, but theoretically speaking, you're pretty much just tossing a coin, getting heads and tails 50% of the time. Now explain the likelihood of John and Nolene's next child being a girl. So this is looking at, a really easy way to understand this question is that if we're not talking about having children here, if we just talk about, thinking about flicking a coin. So if you flick a coin, the first time it's heads, flick a coin the second time it's heads, flick a coin the third time it's heads, what's the probability of the fourth one being heads again? And the chance is still 50-50. Okay, because you need to understand that the previous fertilization, the previous children, have no effect on the future offspring. So if I flick a coin, I could have got tails 100 times in a row, which is extremely unlikely, but could possibly happen. People win lotto and jackpot and all that sort of stuff, which is extremely unlikely as well. It's just all probability it can happen, but not very likely. Just remember that all of the previous children are what I tend to call they're independent from one another, so they have no influence whatsoever. Okay, so the chance is still 50%. It's still 50%. Where are you? It doesn't say 50% here, but it says has no effect, so it's still 50%. Okay, so if it's XX and it's female, if it's XY it's male, because the previous fertilization have no effect on the next child because they are independent from one another. So the key word that I'm kind of not saying in this particular set of answers is independent. So these are independent events and they're random. Okay, so the previous fertilization have no effect. Okay, so we're gonna look at this particular question here. So let's have a look. The person is a stone bench kitchen worker. He has this particular lung disease which is caused by breathing in stone dust. Oh, look at that, stone bench worker, stone dust. So would the children inherit this disease? So this is where you need to understand that this particular disease is caused by the environment. It's not caused by genetic. It's almost like I always like giving this question to my year 11. If I was to say the science teacher of a year 11 class have gone deaf because the class is too loud and too noisy, and the teacher the eardrums got just couldn't handle it, and then he went deaf. If that teacher was to have a child, would the children be the future children be deaf as well? Obviously everyone would be like, what? That's so random. Of course not. That's nothing to do with genetics. So same thing here. So if this person, due to his work environment, breathing in a lot of stone dust, which causes his lung disease, it has nothing to do with genetics. So this is caused by the environment, so they will not be caused, it will not be passed down. Okay, only if a genetic characteristic can be, so only genetic characteristics can be passed down. And so that's just pretty straightforward. Let's have a look at here. So like we talked about, due to stone dust caused by the environment, only genetic environment characters can be inherited, not those acquired as a result of the environment. Okay, so no children will be born because it's only caused by the environment, not by genetics. So it's almost like, there's certain things that the parents get, they won't pass it down. It's just pretty common sense, pretty straightforward, I hope. Right, next one. Below is okay, so we don't need to see it, doesn't matter. So here we go, a mutation. Now this question shows up every single time. Not necessarily the part that I didn't highlight, but like say these two are quite normally, actually you will often see these words highlighted together, and you often see mutations kind of on its own, but then they kind of combined here together. So this is an extremely popular question. I cannot emphasize this enough. Okay, so you need to make the connection between these terminologies here, and you need to understand how to correctly define them and link them together. Okay, so you need to think about this. So a DNA is your double helix structure, which contains all of your genetic information. A DNA is a section of the gene of the DNA. So sorry, a gene is a section of the DNA, and it codes for one particular characteristic or trait or feature or whatever, it codes for one characteristic. And then, but for that characteristic, for that particular gene, you have the base sequence that codes for that particular gene. And when that base sequence is a little bit different, you have different versions of the same gene called alleles. So these are, so one example, again, not the best example, but everyone understands this. Like, think about hair color. We all have got a color for our hair. So there's a gene, well, multiple genes, but let's just say year 11, so you don't know this. Let's just say there's one gene that codes for hair color, and there are different hair colors, obviously, and then so there are different versions of the same characteristics. There's black, blonde, red, different colors. Okay, so the alleles are different versions of the same gene. And why do they exist? Because they have got a different base sequence. Okay, because a different base sequence will generate a different protein, and then that can be visually observed. Now this is where mutation comes in. Mutation is a change in the base sequence, and when that changes the base sequence, you produce a new allele, and in that case you created a new phenotype. Okay, so the base sequence makes a protein, the protein determines the phenotype, which is what we display physically. So if you think about these, let's just go through that again. The DNA is the whole genetic information. A gene is a section of that DNA. There are lots of genes in the DNA. A gene is a small section of the DNA that codes for one characteristic. Now, what makes up the gene is it's a base sequence. The ATCG base pairing stuff. It's a sequence of these bases that determines how these traits will be coded. And because there are different ways of coding these, different orders of the base sequence, you would have different versions of the same genes, which is called alleles. And then, you make different proteins, and then you have a different phenotype. And this is where mutation comes in. Mutation is a change in the base sequence. So it's changing your ATCG sequencing, and you make a different protein, and you make a different allele, you make a different phenotype. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Very popular question. Make sure you understand these definitions here. Okay, so your DNA, gene, mutation, change of base sequence causes a new version of the gene called an allele, and the new allele codes for phenotype. Okay, so for this particular question, you probably want to link to the question where they specifically said, yeah, so using this mutation, so they specifically want you to link to the HIV infection, so you have to link that there. So that's said in the question. Just be very careful with this type of question. Next one. Discuss whether the gene mutation which protects against HIV virus is helpful to the human population. You should explain how it might be passed on to the next generation. Okay, actually let me have a quick read about the photo. Okay, so it's just a mutation that help people protecting them from HIV virus. And they're asking you whether this will protect, it's helpful to the human population. That is kind of a stupid question. Of course it's gonna help with the human population. I mean, you guys are year 11s, you're not stupid. I mean, this is just, oh man, it's really dumbed down, isn't it? Like, they just, which protects against HIV virus. I think everyone knows that this is bad. If it's helpful, you know, if we have something that protect against it, of course it's good to the human population. So how it might be passed down. So how this works is that you're gonna have individuals that have got this particular gene mutation, right? So you're gonna have people that have this, you're gonna have people with this particular gene mutation. And what these guys are going to do is that these guys will survive longer, you know, they will live longer, they'll hopefully survive longer. And then what they will do once they get to a certain age is that they will get married and they will make children, they will reproduce. And when they reproduce, they can pass on these favorable, this particular mutation to the future generation. And then over many generations, this particular trait, this particular mutation will be seen in the population because it increases the chance of survival. You know, if HIV becomes a very problematic virus, I mean, it already is, but then if you have a small population that have got this gene mutation that prevents them from getting HIV or helps them fight HIV, then these group of people will be able to survive longer, in theory, and then pass on that particular trait once they reproduce to future generation. And that means the future generation will get this trait, and that will be obviously be beneficial. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of a easy question here. So the mutation creates a phenotype protection, so you have less risk of getting disease. So that means more chance of someone surviving, passing on this new gene to the next generation, and then, you know, everything's passed down, and then over many generations, there will be more people with this particular trait because it's beneficial. Okay, so hopefully that's not too bad there. Question 3, Himalayan wolves. Okay, explain how sexual reproduction causes again, this is a guaranteed excellence question that comes up every single year because this particular paper is called genetic variation, so they obviously want you to talk about genetic variation. Okay, so you do want to talk about these two things, so they actually are quite generous. They gave you the two things they need to talk about. So you need to talk about meiosis. So when you do meiosis, you produce gametes that have half of the number of chromosomes, and all of these gametes are unique. The reason why they're unique is because of independent assortment, how these chromosomes are randomly assorted into different gametes, and while they are lining up and being split apart, they do crossing over, which they swap bits and pieces of the genetic information, so that creates new very unique gametes. And then these gametes, you produce, like say for a male, we produce billions and billions of sperm cells, So which one of these lucky guys is going to be end up in fertilization is completely random. So you're going to have random gametes from the male and the female that will end up combining together, fertilizing each other. So these random gametes, they're all unique. Okay, so they're going to randomly get chosen and then produce a genetically unique offspring. So that's why it's, especially if you have a sibling, twin sister, twin brothers, that's a little bit different. But if you got a sibling, you will be very similar, but you'll be a little bit different because of these two processes. Okay, so it's very important that you know these guys. So process of, let's start with meiosis, random assortment. So this is independent assortment, crossing over that creates new alleles, and then when they fertilize, each is random, each have unique DNA because the alleles, the gametes are all unique, and then you produce a genetically unique offspring. Okay, and then the Himalayan wolves, they have new combination, which means they can take more oxygen. That's great for them because when you're living up that high altitude, you need more oxygen. Explain the link between above 4,000 meters. So it's more of a so the advantage of having variation is that there will be, if you think about this, think about all these wolves, those that can take more oxygen, and then you have your normal wolves that can just normally do their own things, but then all of a sudden you have a new combination of genes that means they can take more oxygen in the air. So explain the link of variation to the the wolf population above 4,000 meters. So that means those wolves that can take more oxygen, same thing as the one we talked about before, they are more likely to survive, because if they can breathe and get more oxygen, they can survive longer, they can hunt better, they can increase the chance of survival. So they're more likely to survive. That means they will pass on their genes, they'll pass on this combination of genes or these alleles to the next generations. Overall, this particular trait will become favorable and become dominant in this population because it will help the individuals to survive, and these individuals will continue to breed, and over time, over generations, doesn't happen overnight, but over generations and generations of wolves, these the future generations will most likely all have this particular combinations of alleles because of the passing down of the genetic information. Okay, so hopefully this is a really short paper. I'm very surprised there's no questions on pedigree charts. I'm very surprised there's no questions on test cross. But other than that, this is and then normally they will give you like some achieved questions for the ATCG base pairing stuff, but that's also absent. So overall, I think this paper is quite feels a little bit narrow in terms of the concept that they are. So probably not the best paper to truly reflect your understanding of the topic, because as you could see, some of the questions were a little bit repeated. But still, hopefully you guys found this helpful, and like always, please like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.